YouTube video that dominated our feeds this week. Sam Seder, host of the progressive internet radio show and podcast The Majority Report, just starred in a now viral video titled 20 Trump supporters take on one progressive. The video is published by Jubilee, a popular YouTube channel, as part of its Surrounded series, which features one guest debating 10, 15, or 20 other people simultaneously. If you're curious about the logistics of how that works, you can check out the video on Jubilee's YouTube channel.
Logistics. It's a bunch of chairs.
And you know what? You have to see to believe it. But for our purposes today, I want to talk about some of the crazy conversations that poor Sam Seder had to have. And the only way to explain them is with this very representative clip.
DEI essentially provides tax cuts for the end of the year when you create your tax returns. They give you a tax credit for hiring someone who is Black or a person of color.
We're talking about government agencies that do not get tax cuts. Government agencies.
They don't.
No,
yes, they do. They absolutely do.
I'm talking about
every private and public sector gets tax cuts when you hire a person of color.
Government agencies don't pay taxes. Government agencies are funded by the government.
That is not true. That is not true. And you know what? I think the whole juxtapose of this entire conversation.
What month is this?
This is January.
Okay, so we can agree on that.
Wow.
Okay, so you and I both watched this.
It's upsetting.
I knew this was our last topic. I was like, I'm going to get some representative clips because it's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I watched the whole thing. I watched the whole thing, and
it's all like this.
I have to say, it's a banger. I have totally turned around on it.
Really?
I think it's great. I don't think it's great. I think it's fucking horrifying.
Sure. No, I understand.
In the past, I have watched the one conservative debates.
Yeah.
Here's the thing with it is that whoever the person that the 20 people are debating is, that person is almost always more prepared.
Of course.
And better at this than the other people.
Right. That's kind of what you're watching for.
Yeah, that's what you're watching for. So like my views on this have been, shaped by watching Charlie Kirk do it or whoever else they've had do it, right?
Sure.
This is the first one I've watched. I didn't watch the Pete Buttigieg one. I guess Pete's also done this.
Yep.
And been the one person. And Dean Withers, who's been one of the participants at some point. He's been But watching Sam do it, I thought it was valuable because I was like, oh, these people are not very well informed.
Yeah.
Yet very smug about not being very well informed.
Yeah, the smugness
Many of them very open about being like this. One woman is like just a white nationalist, basically. She's like, what's wrong with xenophobic nationalism? It was literally a quote from her.
Yep.
And Sam Seder's like, he like, you see him suddenly get it, that's who she is. And he's like, you know what, I'm not going to debate you on this. We just have a fundamental difference here.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought like, and this was I was going to bring a take here that breaks Austin's brain because Austin has been talking a lot about Gavin Newsom's podcast.
I know he's really into Gavin Newsom's podcast.
And my take is Gavin Newsom's podcast should be more like how Sam Seder was debating these people.
I agree with that.
Because this was it was him exposing their ideas for what there are.
Yeah.
And some of them I don't want to be some of them made some good points here and there, and he took them apart. And I just thought it was more useful than like, hey, how are you? And like, tell me about MAGA.
I agree. What I will say for it is that I appreciated that Sam Seder seemed to see that the value here was not like an emotionally satisfying moment of like Sam Seder dunks on conservatives and shuts them down, but rather like, let's draw them out and see like what is going on inside the bubble that these people live within. And that is, I think, valuable and important. And I agree. I would love to see Gavin Newsom do that. I do think it's important to see it in context a little bit in the way that people actually hold beliefs and ideas. Because I think there can be something a little bit, misleading is not the right word, but when you kind of draw people out or when you ask them what they believe and then confront them about it, they harden their views in a way that I think is not necessarily representative of the way that people actually hold beliefs. Like, I think this is easy for someone like you or I, or probably a lot of listeners of the show who are very high information, highly engaged in politics, easy for us to miss, is that we have like very discrete, clear views. They all fit together in a belief system. We know where they come from. There's an ideology behind it.
We have a coherent worldview.
We have a coherent worldview.
At least to us.
Right. Maybe, look,
you might hate it. But
you might hate it, but at least it's an ethos. Most people do not hold views that way. For most people, their views they're much squishier, they're much more softly defined. They might hold multiple contradictory beliefs and might hold multiple contradictory quote unquote facts in their head about the same topic.
And again, no judgment on this necessarily.
Sure.
Some judgment for some people, but,
No,
but I'm
just
not saying
understanding
coherent
how it
like our
works.
view is better. I'm just
Right.
saying it coheres. It literally coheres together, and
Right.
most people's do not.
Most people who are lower information, the beliefs are more symbolic. It's not, I literally believe. Now, once this guy was pressed on, do you literally believe that government agencies get tax cuts for, first of all, pay taxes, which is crazy, and then get tax cuts for hiring people of color, he's going to harden that. And that is partly what I think can be like slightly misleading about this format, is now it looks like he holds that view very strongly. But I think often when people express views like this, and this is true, people on the right and the left, just people who are like normal, low information, they mean it as kind of like, well, this is how I feel about hiring practices. And this is, I think that government agencies aren't representative enough. And I'm going to kind of express that in something that like doesn't actually make sense if you examine it. And so I don't care if this guy got hardened in his beliefs or not. I do just think that it's worth keeping in mind when you see this, that in this context, they're going to look like very firm, concrete beliefs. But in any other context, they're probably not going to be expressed quite that way.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And it is interesting that some folks on the right thought that like these kids destroyed Sam Cedar.
Did they really?
Yeah, like on Twitter, that's like some of the discourse. Most
sure.
people, I think, have judged it that Sam,
Right.
Sort of wiped the floor with them.
Yeah.
But again, I don't even like who won or who didn't win or who got destroyed or who didn't
Right.
is not actually what I found useful or interesting
I would say
about
America got destroyed.
America got destroyed. But even like Vulture did an interview with Sam afterwards about it, and he sort of talked about the experience and how he didn't know what he was walking into because they don't tell you who's going to be the people are in advance. He just walked in and just heard it, and so
Who knows what the hell they're
some
going
of
to
it
say.
truly shocked him and disturbed him, and some of it he was like prepared for because you write your own prompts, right? Like it was like prompt number 1. I think that Trump's policies hurt the working class and help the rich, right? Whatever.
Sure.
That's the prompt, and then they argue about that. So he got to control that. He did say, like when he was talking with the woman who said, "What's wrong with xenophobic nationalism?" He's like, and some views are so out there that I was like, I would just rather. I think that most of the country agrees with me and not her, so I'm not going to go into them.
Right.
My only thought about that was not that I guess I'm just a glutton for punishment, but I was like, I actually think that we are, and this is one of the reasons why I liked the video and liked the whole exercise, is we are in a moment now where I think you do have to make the case for multiracial democracy.
I agree 100%.
And I think when we've had this whole debate about we can't make the election about democracy because people care about, the cost of living and stuff like that. I think one of the problems there is that debate was us saying democracy's obviously good,
Right.
and trying to convince people that the other side hates democracy.
Yep.
And we actually have to make the case for why democracy is good. And that could work better because it's not using the word democracy.
And
But we have to make a case for the system. We have to make a case for
the
a
thumbnail was so
multiracial.
misleading. I thought this was going to be them talking to Sam Cedar. Lame.
Or on his own voters.
Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
On today's show, we'll talk about Donald Trump's probably unlawful order to kill the Department of Education and his move to starve colleges of funding that have political views he doesn't like. Doge is busy making it harder for seniors to get their Social Security, which seems efficient. and they literally staged an armed invasion of the U.S. Institute of Peace. We'll get to that wild story. And because we're nerds, we're going to dive into the election postmortem from David Shore and Blue Rose Research, which is notable because it includes 26 million survey responses. So lots of data to dig through. But first, now that we have a Republican Congress that seemingly exists only to do whatever Trump tells them to do, the last remaining check on the president's power is the judicial branch, which Trump and Elon and the MAGA regime are now going to war with. So for several weeks now, the president's billionaire top advisor has been using his social media platform to call for the impeachment of judges that rule against the Trump administration. But the situation escalated last week when James Boasberg, the chief judge of the D.C. Circuit Court, tried to block Trump from jailing people in a foreign prison without due process, an order that the Trump regime partly ignored, arguing that some of the flights were already over international waters when the ruling came down. The MAGA position is apparently that the president should be able to lock up whoever he wants in an El Salvador mega prison run by a brutal dictator, so long as he tells us they're a threat to America. We just have to take his word for it. So one of Trump's minions in Congress, Brandon Gill, introduced articles of impeachment against Judge Boasberg. Trump himself also called for the judge's impeachment. And here's what he said when asked about it by Laura Ingraham this week.
Many people have called for his impeachment, the impeachment of this judge. I don't know who the judge is, but he's radical left. He was Obama appointed. We have very bad judges, and these are judges that shouldn't be allowed. I think at a certain point you have to start looking at what do you do when you have a rogue judge. The judge that we're talking about, you look at his other rulings, rulings unrelated, but having to do with me, he's a lunatic. You have local judges, local federal judges, local judges, period, and DAs and prosecutors, DAs, state attorney generals that want to really take over. I think some of it's for the publicity. They love the publicity. All of a sudden, they're on the front page of every newspaper, but they have no right to be.
So we are only about 60 days into Trump's second term, and we are in a very dark place already. So dark, we even got this highly unusual statement from Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts this week. Quote, "For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose." What do you think? John Roberts, welcome to the Resistance.
Good job, John Roberts. Not a sentence we say very often on this podcast.
Yeah.
The fact of the statement is very notable, right? I will say that the statement was, there was a lot of sort of, criticism online that he never mentioned Trump's name. Then when I actually went and read it, it's actually a lot less mealy-mouthed than I assumed, and John Roberts is pretty mealy-mouthed in a lot of ways. And so, to his credit here, and I think the statement probably speaks to what we're going to see from John Roberts over the course of the next few years here, which is trying to walk this fine line between defending the independence of the judiciary, and preserving his legacy, right? He has overseen the greatest drop in trust in the Supreme Court in its history during his period of time as Chief Justice, while not going so far as to poke the bear to the point where Trump will outright defy an order or even begin to radicalize people against the Supreme Court. Because if Republicans stop liking the Supreme Court, no one's going to like the Supreme Court, because they already turned off a whole bunch of Democrats with everything they've done, but most notably the Dobbs decision.
We should also say this about Judge Boasberg. He was elevated to the D.C. Circuit Court by Obama, but he was not appointed by Obama. That is incorrect from Trump, from the White House. Every Republican has been saying that. He's a George W. Bush appointee. Some of the things Boasberg has done, he dismissed Trump's tax return lawsuit so that we couldn't see Trump's tax returns. He ordered the release of Hillary's emails, limited grand jury material disclosure in Trump's classified documents case. So not exactly...
Impeach. Maybe we should impeach him.
Not exactly a radical left lunatic. He used to be the head of the FISA court, the court that approves surveillance warrants. So this is not some lunatic leftist. So the White House and Republicans in Congress, they have to know that they don't have anywhere close to the votes needed to impeach anyone, let alone a judge. You need 67 votes in the Senate to impeach or to convict And so why do you think they keep pushing this? Like, is the hope that the constant threats and accusations are just going to undermine the legitimacy of the judicial system? Is that the play?
Do you think you're sure they know that it takes 67
I mean,
votes?
I don't think Elon does. He's been tweeting about it
Yeah.
forever, and I think he's just a dumb shit who has not spent a lot of time studying up on the government he's trying to destroy, but that's him.
Yeah, so I think Elon, maybe even some of these members of Congress, there is a collection of people with broken brains who spend too much time online, have time reading books, who don't know it. But Stephen Miller was tweeting about this. Those people do know, and I think the goal here is pretty clear. It is to set the stage to till the ground for the moment when Trump wants to defy a court order, because he has not done that yet. He has said he's not going to do it. And he does not have the public on his side, right? There is a Washington Post Ipsos poll that shows that 84% of voters, including strong majorities of Republicans, believe that if a court declares something the Trump administration is doing is illegal, that Trump must abide by that order. Only 11% think he should defy it. And so if you want to get to the point where you can actually do that, you have to do what they did to the media, do what they're doing to the universities. You have to destroy trust in that institution, and this is the beginning part of that process.
We should say that just before we recorded, Judge Boasberg just accused the government of evading its obligations and moved closer to holding them in contempt for not explaining, they still haven't explained, why they didn't abide by his order to turn the planes around. So he is not backing down with all these threats, but he's pretty angry at the government, and I think he should be. This is the Trump administration thinks that they are on solid ground on this one because they think, who really wants Venezuelan gangs in the United States? But the more we learn about this and the more information that's come out, not because of the government, but because of reporting and because some of these people's families have and lawyers have learned about where they are, it is shocking what is happening. The New York Times reports that the Trump folks believe that the Alien Enemies Act, which is what Trump invoked to, do this, allows federal agents to enter homes without a warrant. So currently, immigration agents without a warrant can basically just knock on your door and ask to come in, and that's all they can do unless they have a warrant because of the Fourth Amendment. But Trump and the government are basically now saying, well, Alien Enemies Act, if we think that there's a Venezuelan gang in there and we've labeled them a domestic terrorist organization, or then we can just come, send federal ICE agents into people's house without a warrant. Which now you may say, okay, well, if I'm a U.S. citizen, then they're not going to come to my house. Well, how is anyone going to know? How's anyone going to know? They could show up at a U.S. citizen's house and say they suspect that Tren de Aragua is hiding in your house, and then take you away. And who's going to know? Since we're not doing due process anymore, we're just fucking putting people on planes, sending them to El Salvador, and locking them up for indefinite periods of time.
It is just truly astounding that they've taken all of the checks and balances out of the system, right? You don't need to go to a judge to get a warrant to go in the house, and the person you get in the house, you do not have to present to a judge before you send them out of the country. And if the Trump administration can be so fucking stupid as to accidentally cancel an Ebola prevention program,
right?
Do we really think they're not going to make some mistakes on the people they're deporting? And we're already hearing stories of these. That there are people waking up in an El Salvadorian mega prison that is famous for how horrible the conditions are, infamous for how horrible the conditions are, who were not members of these gangs, right? Who were not should not have been subject to this, because the point is you stop in front of a judge and a judge helps verify that this is the person that the Trump administration says it is. And then if they are a member of this gang or have reasons to be deported, or there's another reason why they should be deported, then they're deported. But now this is it is fully and totally authoritarian. It runs against everything that our system was set up for.
They grabbed this guy who's a professional soccer player in Venezuela. This guy showed up at 2 protests of Maduro's, to protest Maduro, the dictator in Venezuela. And the Maduro's regime tortured him. And he got away. He came to the United States. He applied for asylum. And they mistakenly think his tattoo is Tren de Aragua, when it's actually a fucking soccer tattoo. And so they got the tattoo artist to like sign an affidavit to say this. And so the family was waiting for an immigration hearing and all this because the guy had been held for a while, and then just woke up one day and was just taken to this El Salvadoran prison. So a man who was tortured by the Maduro regime is now being held indefinitely in a prison in El Salvador because they mistakenly think he's a gang member. And then when DHS was asked about this, they're like, well, that's one tattoo. And there was also a social media post where he had a gang sign, and then everyone's like, no, that's just a thumbs up like soccer sign that they have. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. This is what's happening. No hearing, no evidence, no nothing. You see Elon's maxing out on donations to Republicans who support impeaching judges?
Of course he is, right? The guy loves to buy a politician. And it giving federally regulated campaign contributions is a particularly inefficient way for Elon Musk to flex his muscle because he can only give the same amount as people like you and I or anyone else out there.
Yeah.
But it creates this incentive structure for more people to act like morons
like Brandon
and support
Gill,
these impeachments. Yeah, exactly. Right. So you're going to get more people like that because they want the money, they want the support, they want the attention that comes from being associated with Elon. And that is one thing Elon Musk is very good about doing. It is leveraging his money for attention and influence, and this is another way in which he's doing that.
He's also spent well over $10 million on a Wisconsin Supreme Court race that could flip the state's liberal majority back to a conservative majority. So early voting is now underway in that race, and the election is April 1st. Dan, you want to talk about the stakes here?
Yeah, so if you live in Wisconsin, this is an absolutely essential race because the balance of the Supreme Court is once again in question. You may remember not that long ago, we talked about on the show a lot, there was a race to a couple years ago, Janet Protasiewicz, who I think you guys even campaigned with.
We did.
In Wisconsin. Won an election, gave the Liberals a majority. These are technically nonpartisan races, but the parties have lined up behind the candidates. Democrats behind Susan Crawford, and Elon Musk and Republicans have lined up behind Brad Schimmel. And when the Liberals have the majority now, they were able to undo one of the nation's most unfair gerrymandering systems and make it so that we have more free and fair elections, because Wisconsin is, as we all know, is the quintessential battleground state, but Republicans were dominating the legislature and the congressional delegation because of that. And going forward, the Wisconsin Supreme Court will hear cases on things like abortion, personal freedom, civil rights. And if you think about this from the perspective of people who aren't in Wisconsin, many of the big cases that are about the 2026 and 2028 elections are going to be conducted will come before that court. So you're either going to have a majority of people who abide by the rule of law or a Supreme Court majority that is bought and paid for by Elon Musk. And just even beyond that, for everyone else, this is the first major election in a battleground state since Trump won.
Yeah.
Elon Musk is on the ballot here. He has spent $10 million. The Democrats and the Crawford campaign have made Elon Musk a centerpiece of it. Brad Schimmel has not committed to recusing himself if any cases involving Elon Musk come up before the court, even though Elon Musk has spent already $10 million to elect him.
And Tesla is currently suing the state of Wisconsin.
Yes.
So the case may come to Brad Schimmel. Yeah.
And if you want to send a message to Elon Musk and to every Republican in the country about how toxic it is to be associated with what Elon Musk is doing, the best way to do that right now, the best way to inflict some measure of political accountability on Elon Musk and Donald Trump is to win this election in Wisconsin on April 1st.
Yeah, and it's close, as they always are in Wisconsin, so it's going to be a really tight race. In order to tip the race, we're sending John Lovett to Wisconsin this weekend. He's doing 6 kickoffs. He's going to be around Madison on Saturday and Milwaukee on Sunday. So go see Lovett if you're in Wisconsin. And
he'll be with Ben Wickler. He's chaperoned on this trip. Yes, to be clear, he's chaperoned.
Yeah, we don't send him to Wisconsin by himself. And you can also go to votesaveamerica.com/Wisconsin, and there's plenty to do as we get to Election Day here. Also, Tommy and I are not going to Wisconsin, but we are going to Norco, California this weekend, Dan.
That is not NorCal, California. That is Norco.
Norco, yeah. It's about an hour and a half
from... Stay on your side of the grapevine, okay?
It's about an hour and a half east of L.A. We're going to be with Ro Khanna, who's doing a town hall in the district of a House Republican who refuses to hold a town hall, Ken Calvert. We've already been to Ken Calvert's district once when we were trying to elect Will Rollins in this last cycle. So we're heading back this time with Ro Khanna. Ro's doing, much like Bernie and AOC are doing these town halls. Ro is doing a series of town halls as well. So that'll be fun. We're going out to see some folks. So come say hi if you're in Norco. Pod Save America is brought to you by Lumen. Did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you will feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life?
I did.
Sponsoring this episode. Big day at the White House on Thursday. Trump signed an order eliminating the Department of Education, which has already seen its workforce halved. Promises made, promises kept. The AP notes that the department handles $1.6 trillion in federal student loans and billions of dollars in programs for colleges and school districts. It also accounts for roughly 14% of public school budgets. The White House claims that none of the department's services or benefits will be disrupted, though they aren't saying how they'll do that without, an actual department with actual employees. Here's what Trump had to say at the signing.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education. And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it. And everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them. But everybody knows it's right. It's doing us no good. We want to return our students to the states. Look, Denmark, Norway, Sweden. I have to tell you, I give them a lot of credit. China's top 10. And so we can't now say that bigness is making it impossible to educate because China's very big.
Bigness.
What the hell is he
Bigness.
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 So as you heard him there, they're acknowledging that they'll need Congress to officially shutter the department, though they certainly don't have 60 votes in the Senate for that. Republicans have already said they'll introduce legislation right after Trump's announcement. What do you think happens here? What do you make of all this?
As you mentioned, they're not passing this bill, right? That is not. Congress is not going to act on this. To put that in some perspective about how hard it is to shut down the Department of Education, Ronald Reagan ran on it. It was a big part of his campaign platform. After winning more than 500 electoral votes in 1984, he couldn't get any traction on it. So it's not become any more popular since then. The Economist YouGov ran this interesting poll where they asked people about the Department of Education, do you want to expand it, keep it the same, reduce it, or eliminate it? The plurality was expanded at 39%. The combined keep it the same and expand it was over 60, and only 17% of people wanted to eliminate it. There is absolutely no appetite for this anywhere. What it is it's just, this is sort of like the birthright citizenship EO he did. He can say promises made, promises kept, and he did this, and then it goes nowhere. But it does sort of create the predicate for Musk and Doge to go in there and eliminate it even further, right? Like maybe the building will still stand and there will still be an office that Linda McMahon will have the opportunity to go to periodically, but the core functions, absent some judicial intervention, are going to be gutted, and it's going to have devastating effects.
Yeah, I mean, I think they know how unpopular it would be to sort of cut the funding or disrupt benefits and services. You got student loans in there. You got the federal education department is responsible for Title I funds for the state. Title I funding is for public schools in disadvantaged communities. So poor working class families. It's for children with disabilities. And so you have kids with disabilities, low-income schools, and all the student loans in the country. And the Trump administration is trying to say, well, they're either going to move the distribution of those under other departments, or they're going to have a smaller or they're going to have, I don't know what they're going to do. But the idea that those services are going to be completely uninterrupted just doesn't square with what most people in education believe, experts in education believe, and also how the entire Doge process has gone so far.
That's
right?
the key point. That's
like,
the key point.
They might think to themselves genuinely that they're not going to disrupt any services and benefits, but they keep firing everyone who knows anything about education.
It's like, to what end, right? Is that they want a real estate transaction to sell the building?
Right.
It's just this is
they think they're saving so much money just like getting rid of all those employees, and they're not, because that's not where most of the money that the Department of Education oversees is coming from.
It's also stupid. Like, this is a way to check off something that was on the wish list long before Project 2025. It was a big part of Project 2025. This has been, Newt Gingrich ran on this in the 90s with a Contract for America. This has been a Republican pipe dream, and this is a way to get a chance to say they did it. Even if they're not accomplishing the specific goal, because they do need Congress for it, they can accomplish the goal in spirit, which is to gut public education in this country.
It seems like a good fight for Democrats to take on. What do you think?
I very much think so. In fact, if you're a Message Box subscriber, you have in your inbox right now a full messaging guide on this.
Yeah.
If you are not a Message Box subscriber, you're lost, I guess. Well, then, I don't know what you've been doing. But so I go through a whole bunch of the polling on a bunch of the message guidance, but let me give the short version of how I think Democrats should talk about this, which is Elon Musk and Donald Trump are shutting down the Department of Education and gutting public education to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. The result of this is going to be teachers are laid off, more kids in the classroom, dilapidated schools, and huge cut to special education funding, all to pay for tax cuts for the ultra wealthy like Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Like that is how you talk about it. It is not about cutting individual funding streams. It is important to say, like, why they're doing it, what is going to happen. It's be specific about what's going to happen and who it benefits.
Yeah, it's. I think along with some of the healthcare cuts, this has got to be probably what's going to piss people off the most, especially if and when we start getting the stories about people whose benefits or loans or whatever else or funding for certain schools was disrupted. Then I think it's really going to blow up.
There's just a context for eliminating the Department of Education that does not exist for USAID, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or the Institute of PETAs we'll talk about in a minute. It's just that people have been talking about this for a very long time. This country, Republicans have been trying to do it for a long time. Voters keep rejecting it time and time again, and now Trump is doing it unilaterally at the behest of the world's richest man in order to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. And so this is a huge opportunity for Democrats. It is one of the things that has the best chance of breaking through in the flood of all the terribleness that's happening.
So, and Trump is also targeting colleges and universities he doesn't like. We have mentioned before the $400 million in federal funding he's threatened to withhold from Columbia unless the school acquiesces to the administration's demands, the deadline for which is Friday when you're listening to this. Some of those demands: banning masks because they were used at the protest last year, giving campus law enforcement wider latitude to arrest, quote, agitators who foster an unsafe or hostile work or study environment, and placing the school's Department of Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies in, quote, academic receivership, which means it's no longer overseen by the actual faculty who teach within it. Now, Trump is also going after his own alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, where the administration froze around $175 million in federal funds because of a trans athlete and swimmer, Leah Thomas, who competed and graduated in 2022. The White House Rapid Response account posted a clip of Fox News announcing the move with the words, "Promises made, promises kept." Given that Leah Thomas graduated 3 years ago, is this promises made, promises kept, or just another way to own the libs that's going to end up just hurting a lot of students at the University of Pennsylvania?
I mean, it's clearly punitive. It's clearly not based on any sort of substance or reality. I think we have to view this in the context of the larger conservative project to systematically and strategically take out any institution that they view as an opposition to right-wing thinking in this country, right? It's why they spent so much time to try to take down unions, right? Passing right-to-work laws. It is why they have gone after the media, which they view as incorrectly in my view, but view as an ally of liberals and Democrats, in part because they are fact-checking and calling out the hypocrisy of what's on the right. And universities, which they've always believed to be a breeding ground of liberal thought. And so they are trying to destroy them. They are trying to cowl them into acting a certain way, and they are trying to gut their funding. And it is part of a bigger project, and we have to view it in that context, I think.
Alan Blinder at the New York Times reported on Thursday about layoffs, hiring freezes, lab shutdowns at universities across the country. What'd you make of that story?
I mean, this is the end result of what they're doing. I thought what was notable in that story was that they wrote that academia was caught flat-footed. I was like, oh, the one time the famously nimble academia was asleep at the wheel. I mean, there is a longer-term challenge. There is more appetite for what Trump is doing here, and it's not just because of the protests around Gaza and the controversy of how a lot of universities handled that and what some of the president said before Congress. Pew, this was in the New York Times, Pew tracks how people feel about the impact of various institutions on American society, and they asked people at universities. And in 2012, only 21% of Americans thought that universities had a negative impact on our society. And by last year, it was up to 45%. And that's not just Trump and Republicans. That is the high cost of college. It is student debt crushing people, and this idea that people have been sold on this idea that the best pathway to success is a 4-year college education, but you're going to leave there with so much debt that it is going to crush you financially. And universities have done a very bad job of, both in the short term around Trump and in the time before that, of one, dealing with the sort of indefensible rise in tuition, but in sort of explaining the role they play in, because they are these nonprofit institutions, some of whom, like the most famous ones, have billions of dollars in endowment, but then take taxpayer money. And what we have not explained, and they have not explained, and maybe people before Trump did not explain well, is that these universities are the laboratories for America.
Yeah.
Right? They're the ones doing the research that is helping us, build new technologies, discover new medicines, figure out how to fight disease. And we have it, and the universities haven't made that case, and people supporting that sort of R&D funding have not made that case.
Well, and the two problems you just mentioned are undoubtedly going to get worse because of what the Trump administration has already done. Universities have not kept tuition down. They haven't done a good job. And so, therefore we are subsidizing higher costs at universities through financial aid, student loans, and all the other stuff that the federal government does to help students attend school. Meanwhile, the costs keep rising and rising and rising. So that's a huge problem. But gutting a bunch of federal funding at universities, do we think that's going to make tuition go down? Do we think that's going to help costs at college? No, of course
Well, they're not interested in it. They want fewer people to go to college.
Right. And then the big one that you mentioned is between what the Trump administration is doing to colleges and universities, between what they're doing to the NIH, what they're doing to other public health agencies, other agencies that are responsible for medical research, for technological research. I mean, it's not, look, part of this is you gut research here and innovation and medical research and scientific research. There's going to be a huge brain drain. And a lot of these scientists and researchers and experts are going to go to other countries, and other countries are going to develop the breakthrough technologies and discoveries and cures that usually happen in the United States. And the industries and jobs and everything else is going to go overseas as well. And we're not going to have them here. But then there's a broader issue, which is like the United States is the place where a lot of these discoveries happen. And if they don't happen here because we're gutting the funding for them, they're just not going to happen. And there was a diabetes study that was like a 30-year diabetes study that they just canceled the contract for. And like that, you're not getting that back. That's just
you can't turn this stuff back on. There was a report right before Trump took office about how close we were coming to a vaccine to deal with colorectal cancer.
I thought it was pancreatic, wasn't it? Was it? Or maybe it was both. I think it was an mRNA for pancreatic cancer.
Well, we can leave all of this in.
Yeah. There was multiple vaccines. Yeah.
But like we're on the cusp of something incredibly important. Like all of the progress it's made on Alzheimer's research, all of that stops and it doesn't start again. And so that's as you point out, like that is the progress on very specific things can have tremendous benefit to people in the world. It's going to stop, and it's not going to happen. And then there is sort of the economic impact in the United States, where these universities, like in this story, they talk about how they may have to stop teaching biochemistry at universities because the labs are funded by research grants. And if the research grants are not there, the labs are not there, and then they won't teach that. And so the next generation of scientists, researchers, doctors, technologists, all of that is not going to happen because of this idiotic, short-sighted effort from the Trump administration. And
for nothing. This is not saving us much money. This is not changing like bloated budgets that needed to be changed. This is just destroying shit because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're going in with a sledgehammer. Elon Musk doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Doge doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. Donald Trump certainly doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Neither does his dumb fucking cabinet. And the saddest part is like we're not gonna know. You know, like there's just going to be these studies are going to go away, and these researchers are going to lose their jobs, and we're not going to know all of the potentially life-saving discoveries that we lost like 10 years down the road.
Yeah, it is deeply depressing because so much in between administrations can be turned back on, right? There's tremendous damage in the 4 years, but you come back in, you can put in new policy, sign a new executive order, pass a new law. The things that Trump is doing, both to universities and the federal government itself, are not things that can be fixed in 1 4-year term.
I know. I keep thinking about like the next Democrats running for president, or, you know, God willing, the next Democratic president. And there's going to have to be like a sort of a massive nationwide, maybe even global effort to like try to recruit really good, smart people back into government and public service, and researchers and scientists and medical and just like and experts. And I think it's gonna be really fucking hard too, because again, why are you taking it? Like, maybe you want to work for the next Democratic administration, but what happens when a J.D. Vance or another Trump comes into office, and then you don't have job security anymore? Like,
right. Like, can the next Democratic president bring in a bunch of incredibly talented political appointees to tackle these problems? Absolutely. And I suspect that will happen. There will be a mobilization of the best and the brightest to come in and do that. But what about the people who keep the government running all the time? The ones who have these jobs in part because of job security. They can do other things, but they're in it for public service, and they're in it because there's a stability in government employment with good benefits. You have like you know what the pay structure is. You can be there a long time, and if that security will no longer exist, having those people there is going to be deeply damaging. I don't know what we would have done when we arrived in the White House if there hadn't been a whole bunch of people who'd been there for the last 3 presidencies,
right?
Who had been making everything work, who knew things, who had institutional knowledge. I mean, it is deeply concerning. Speaking
of Doge, let's check in with the Doge bags and Trump's broader effort to destroy the federal government. Politico reported Wednesday that the Department of Agriculture, USDA, is stopping millions of dollars worth of deliveries to food banks in at least 6 states. And earlier this week, the Social Security Administration announced that you can no longer apply for benefits or change the account where your benefits are delivered over the phone. You either have to verify your identity online or go in person to your local social security office, which will be tough because the AP reported that almost 50 Social Security offices have shown up on Doge's list of federal government site closures. Is this government efficiency at its finest, Dan? We're just making it harder for seniors to obtain their Social Security benefits.
It is Donald Trump waging war on his own voters. Right, the people who are going to be affected most are the people in the rural parts of the country where they are not near a Social Security office. Probably the nearest one just got on that list of 50 that's going to get closed, and it's going to make it impossible for people to get their benefits. There was a report today that there was a 2-hour wait time for calls right now, and a 1-month waiting period for appointments in an office that may close sometime soon. It is truly insane, and these are the kind of things that have real political impact. Congressman Mike Lawler, the Republican, today put out a statement criticizing Trump and Musk for trying to close the Hudson Valley Social Security office. So I think you're going to see that from a lot of people, because this is where it matters. This idea that you're going to make it impossible for people to access their benefits. You're going to make people, older folks have to verify their identity online as opposed to be able to call, is deeply damaging, and I think is going to hurt politically too.
39 million people live in households without any internet connection. 25% of Americans 65 or older have reported never going online. So, and those are Social Security beneficiaries. And like you said, if the low income areas, rural areas, people with disabilities, people who just can't get around because they're older, those are going to be the people hurt by this. And I don't know, maybe Mike Lawler, because he's a Republican in good standing, or will do something crazy. Maybe Mike Lawler will introduce a couple articles of impeachment against a federal judge, and then they'll open up the Hudson Valley office and they'll close one down in a blue district. That's probably where we're headed. I do think I'm sure Democrats are going to be all over this one, because every single poll you see everywhere is Social Security is like the number one issue for folks, and it's probably it's the number one vulnerability for Republicans, and it's probably why Donald Trump has said over and over again he's not going to touch Social Security. So hoping that the Democrats jump all over this one.
Go. I mean, this is old school, but go do press conferences outside the Social Security offices on that list.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Invite some influencers. We'll make it new age communications, but but go stand in front of them. Take a vertical video of yourself in front of one, but go to a Social Security office.
Bring all your canes.
Yeah.
Wave them around.
Yeah.
Go from the Tesla dealers to the Social Security offices. All right, fewer Tesla dealers, more Social Security offices. Again, peaceful.
Yes.
One last Doge item, not so peaceful. We got to talk about Doge's armed invasion of the U.S. Institute of Peace. This is unfortunately a real story, Dan. Here's the short version. Some Doge bags gained access to the Institute of Peace on Monday night. The Institute of Peace, we should let you know, is it's a nonprofit organization. It is not part of the executive branch. It is funded by Congress. It was founded by Congress, funded by Congress. It's a nonprofit, but of course it has government money. And the job of the Institute of Peace is to help resolve conflicts around the world, as the name suggests. Yes. So, but Donald Trump decided we're going to zero out the Institute of Peace, a couple other agencies, just like they're doing everywhere else. Okay, so the Doge bags get access to the Institute of Peace on Monday night by apparently threatening the federal contracts for the outside private security firm that the Institute employed. This is according to Politico. Some of the staff at the Institute of Peace tells the Doge bags that they're trespassing, but then they ignore the Institute of Peace staffers, the Doge bags, and they, quote, proceeded to walk towards the gun safe. Then they contacted DC's, the Institute of Peace staffers, contact DC's Metropolitan Police Department on the trespassers, on the Doge people. But in an alarming twist, the police end up detaining the Institute of Peace's head of security and lawyers instead, at the direction of a State Department flunky who has since been declared the U.S. Institute of Peace's new acting president, and who by that time had shown up with even more Doge bags. DC police said in a statement that they were contacted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, our pal Ed Martin, his office in D.C., yeah. Eagle-eyed Ed, who's threatening, members of Congress and everyone else. Crazy man. The Institute then filed an emergency request in court trying to deny Doge access, which Judge Beryl Howell denied, though she did question Doge's tactics. Good for her. She said, quote, this conduct of using law enforcement, threatening criminal investigation, and using armed law enforcement from 3 different agencies. Why? Just because Doge is in a rush? Feels like all this could have been handled in a few emails. Like, hey, could you clear out of the office? We've zeroed out your budget. Like, what? Or if they refuse to, like, hey, we're going to take you to court then because we believe we can shut your agency down and you don't think we can. But what? What did you make of all this?
I mean, it's truly perfect. A bunch of tech flunkies arranging an armed invasion of the Institute of Peace. I mean, it's just, they probably don't have the authority to shut the thing down. Like, that is, it is not, as you said, not a part of the executive branch per se, created by Congress. And like this sort of like brute force activity, taking on the deep state. Ooh, we bullied the Institute of Peace guys. It's like bravado. It's like there's like that'll get you plaudits in MAGA Trump world. And so you'll see more of this absurdity. Like, they seem so tough the way they got the cops to help them get into the Institute of Peace. And as opposed to just doing it, I guess another way to think about this is, there is a right way and a wrong way to do these things, even if you disagree, even no matter what you feel about the value of the Institute of Peace. There's a way to go about it, but Elon Musk and Doge will not and cannot do it the right way, which constantly keeps hurting their efforts to do the thing that we disagree with, because they keep getting stopped in court and it keeps being messier and dumber than it needs to be. But this is just like the extreme example of that.
What's really worrying about it is so now we have the Department of Homeland Security and ICE agents deciding that they don't need a warrant anymore, and that they can now, go in and look for Tren de Aragua in any house that they want. We are flying people to prisons in Venezuela, to prisons in El Salvador with no due process. We have a U.S. attorney in D.C. who is now sending FBI agents and D.C. police in to detain these staffers at this agency who just didn't want to let a bunch of people in to shut them down. And it what kind of government bureaucrat or person at a nonprofit is going to want to live in Washington, D.C.? And you start thinking oh yeah, that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to make the city Trump City now.
To make everything so uncomfortable that people will just leave. And they've had great success at that. They've had great success.
And just the number of examples now of using the power of the state, force, police, FBI, just against Americans, against immigrants, against people they don't like. It's very scary. Very, very scary.
We are so far past right now what even some of the most hyperbolic arguments about what Trump would do are. We are right there.
Yep. And it is, I don't know if it's part of it is I know part of it's the media environment, that why, I keep wondering why there's not more alarm every day. And I don't know if it's just some people are I can't tune in all the time. I can't, get worried about this all the time. If it's just that people don't know, if people aren't hearing about it all, if Democrats aren't fighting hard enough or making enough noise. I don't know what it is, but it feels oddly quiet for the level of insanity that's taking place right now.
I've been thinking a lot about, there are a million reasons for this. I think we, as a society, political stakeholders, the media, just average everyday people, lack the vocabulary and the imagination to talk about what's happening here because it's not something that we ever thought would happen in this country.
Yeah.
And so we just don't know how to do it. And almost every other country in the world has been has faced this down at some point, or they've gone through it, right? Where they've had an authoritarian regime, or they've been a dictatorship, and they've come out of that with so much reform. That's never happened here. It's never been a fear here, and since the very beginning. And so we can't comprehend it. And I got a New York, I'm not complaining about the New York Times headlines here, but as an example, when Trump gave that insane speech at the Department of Justice, where he goes to the Department of Justice, a place where presidents almost never go, and gives a speech calling out his enemies while surrounded by his self-appointed law enforcement hacks. And it was Trump gives unusually fiery speech at the Department of Justice or something like that. It's just no one knows how to talk about it. But there is a media environment change here too. I would think about what it felt like in 2018 when people became aware that Trump was putting kids in cages in detention centers. And the outrage, it dominated the conversation. I mean, I was on a book tour at the time. I lost all my interviews, right? Because that's all anyone wanted to talk about, for good reason, right? That was the right choice. But it became the dominant national story. Now,
think about the first week when people flooded the airports because of the Muslim ban.
Yeah. Well, that's the response, right? That's another point, is that there was a way in which the quote unquote resistance was involved in attention-getting tactics that did drive some of these things, which is not happening now to the same extent. But just think about everything you said about what's happening in El Salvador. If that had happened in a 2017, 2018 media environment, it would be a dominant conversation, but nothing can be a dominant conversation right now in the same way. And that's not just because Trump has a more effective flood the zone strategy now. It's because just the world has changed so much and people are living in these algorithmically designed bubbles. The power and reach and influence of the people who could drive the conversation on a mass scale is just massively diminished from where it was years ago. So this is how this happens, right? This is exactly how it happens, is that people aren't paying enough attention, and the people who are opposing it are not drawing enough attention or grabbing people by the lapels to make them pay attention. And we are headed someplace very dangerous.
I've been wondering if this also partly explains sort of the odd polling numbers for Trump that we've been getting, which is he's so underwater on the economy. And it's the one issue that's dragging him down the most. And on a lot of other issues in his overall approval rating, it's not as low as you would think. And I wonder if it's because the economy and inflation and cost of living is like the one issue that people are experiencing every day, even if they're not tuning into the news and the Trump show version 2. And all the other stuff is just not breaking through as much because people aren't paying as close attention, and because the media environment's so diffuse.
Your news consumption is not correlated with your exposure to high prices.
Right.
Like your news consumption is correlated with whether you know about what's happening in El Salvador or shutting down the Department of Education or any of the other 12 terrible things we're going to talk about on this pod and future pods. But whether you can follow no news, you still have to go to the store and buy eggs, gas, food. You have to pay your rent, your mortgage, etc.